My policy desire here is that we flip the model we've had in place for student accommodation. So at the moment, there's about 45,500 purpose built student accommodation units in Ireland, beds. But two-thirds of them are private and a third of them are public. Now, if I look at other jurisdictions, if I look at other countries, I think we can learn a lot from there. What we need to do, we have a sector that has a lot of land banks, a lot of land banks. We have a sector that actually has a lot of planning permission to build student accommodation.
Hmm.
But what we've also had is market failure. It hasn't made sense, it hasn't been viable for the colleges to build. And as a state, and hands up, we have never invested public funds in building student accommodation. So just before the summer recess, I made a presentation to the Cabinet Committee on Housing, received the Taoiseach's support, and we're going to now, for the first time, put in place a fund to start building purpose-built student accommodation for the reasons that you say, so students can have that full normal college experience. And also, I think on-campus accommodation can be safe too.
How do you control the price? Because often the on campus accommodation is market price, really. It's not cheap accommodation, it's not subsidized accommodation. I think when I came across DCU, I think it was 3,000 a term, and that was a few years back.
Yeah.
So it's not cheap.
It varies a lot, being very honest. I mean, it varies very significantly from, I think I've seen some accommodation for €445 a month in some rooms in Galway to much, much higher, 1,600 a month in one college in Dublin, which is clearly not affordable for anybody.
Some of those things were built, though, aimed at the foreign student, weren't they? The
And
well-heeled foreign student.
and I think that's true too. But to answer your question directly, what you do is this. Well, you do two things. You, as part of the state investing money, there will be an affordability agreement reached with the colleges. So we're going to come up with a model where we will take an equity share, probably, where we'll take a stake, and in return, rents will have to be capped, right? So that's the first thing, and we're working this through with the sector, and I hope to be in a position to start progressing this scheme in the coming months. We have a couple of thousand units with planning permission today that I want to get on and see built. Second thing, though, is I don't think on the affordability issue, I'm very concerned about it, but there are other ways of dealing with affordability as well. The student grant system, for example. So we've massively increased by 25 to 33% the student grants for students who live further away. In other words, students who are more likely to have to pay rent. So there are two ways. One, you reach an agreement on affordability in return for state investment. And secondly, you can help address the cost of rent through things like student grants.
The private sector will build with a view to a return. Now, if a pension fund builds, often, I'm thinking of continental Europe, they're not looking for a big payday. Our guys tend to look for big paydays here and paydays quickly. Pension funds take much longer term views of things, customized student accommodation does not have to be an ensuite for everybody. There are all sorts of different ways of doing it cleverly, and I'm not talking about the discredited kind of co-living where you pay €1,400 a month for a car parking space.
Well, look, I think you're entirely right in the sense that the Union of Students of Ireland themselves have worked to put in place a spec, what they believe a student needs. And it's not a bowling alley. And I don't say that flippantly. We've actually seen private development, so-called student accommodation with a bowling alley. No student wants that. I mean, what we want here is good, clean, safe, secure accommodation. And the spec that the Union of Students of Ireland have worked with us on is the spec that we'll be using. There are good examples. I mean, I've seen good accommodation in Mary I, in Tipperary. There are good examples of where this has been done in the past, but we have to be truthful here. I don't believe the market on its own will be able to fix both the affordability and the supply issue, and that's why the state now will intervene.